digitaljamsessions.com.
Hello and welcome to this Digital Jam session. Today we're joined by Kristen, who is from the United Nations UNDP group, but we also have with us once again Dennis Mortenston from X.AI. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
So I am going to ask you both to introduce yourselves in a little bit more detail exactly what you do in your respective organisations, because for many now who have been exposed to the lovely Amy, they still find it quite hard to understand and comprehend exactly what's just happened to them. So Dennis, why don't we start with you, and why don't you explain all about Amy?
So when my mom asks me, so what do you do? I tell her that I schedule meetings, and that is really the end of my pitch.
Yes.
I think the difference between how we schedule meetings and how other people would envision us do it is that we've moved what used to be a human process into that of being a machine process. So when, say, Kristen and I want to meet up for a cup of coffee in downtown Manhattan, and she shoots me an email and says, hey, Dennis, do you got time to meet up? My reply will be one for where I say, hey, Kristen, I would love to meet up. I have CC'd in Amy. She can put something on my calendar. Come early next week, not Tuesday, though. And Amy then is not a person in the front office. She's this intelligent agent that has the capability to have this very human-like conversation, really negotiation perhaps, with Kristen on exactly when, where, constraints, and so on and so forth, and come to a conclusion, and once concluded, send us an invite. So instead of you paying $50,000 a year plus overhead to have somebody kind of manage your calendar, you pay me $9. And in that way, we end up kind of democratizing the access to an assistant versus what it used to be for where only the select few, if they become SVP of Flim Flam and Time Inc., would get access to it. But now even people like myself, you, Tanya, Kristen, will be able to have somebody kind of manage our calendar. So that's us. We spent the last 2 years in the basement, in the dark, 60 propeller heads, trying to kind of solve this, and we're almost there.
I'd say you're pretty darn close. But Kristen, why don't you tell us more about what you do within the UNDP, because it's quite a broad organisation and a broad scope when you say United Nations or UNDP. Why don't you tell us a little more specifically about the SDG Action Group?
Thanks, Tanya. So United Nations SDG Action Group is actually completely brand new. And that's because the United Nations just went through a process where they set a new global agenda, which is going to guide the world towards a more equitable, sustainable, profitable future. And that includes climate change, and that includes governance, and that includes lots of new things that the UN has never worked on. And that was ratified in September by all governments, 193 countries. And it's a promise from world leaders to their people that they're going to work together to try and make a better place for present and future generations. So
Wow.
we actually... I know, it's a kind of crazy thing. Nobody knows about it, though. So that's one of our kind of key things that we're going to work on. And so our campaign was actually formally called the Millennium Campaign because prior to these Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, also known as global goals, there was something called the Millennium Goals. And they were also for 15 years. Only 8 of them instead of 17. They didn't include governance, didn't include the environment, and they really just focused on having extreme poverty and trying to raise the poorest of the poor up to the middle class kind of thing. So we were formerly the Millennium Campaign. We are now the Sustainable Development Campaign, and that's a little bit of a long story to tell you how we actually exist. But I can tell you a little bit more about what we are supposed to be working on for the next 15 years. And that's a couple of different things. One is accountability and monitoring. We had previously conducted a global survey which asked people very simply what 6 of 16 things would most improve the life for them and their family. And that was actually input into the political process to build these goals. And we actually reached almost 10 million people with that survey, which is a lot of people.
That's a rather large number of people, yes.
And we did that in 3 different ways. One was just online, which actually didn't have that much pickup, only 1 million people. through SMS in some rural areas. That was about 600, 700,000. And when you start to look at kind of the numbers in that, it gets really interesting because you see the gender imbalance about women not having access to mobile phones and things like that. And then the majority, or almost 80%, was offline ballots. So young people, grassroots style, going out into their communities, trying to ask their neighbors to tell the UN what matters to them. And so that was
with good old-fashioned paper.
Good old-fashioned pen and paper, believe it or not. And then an Excel spreadsheet, which is another old-fashioned thing these days, right?
And through that, you were able to acquire an audience of about 10 million people who actually didn't just interact, but kind of told the UN exactly what they thought was most important.
Mm-hmm. And it's an incredibly rich open data set that you can find online, data.myworld2015.org. And it still serves as kind of a little bit of a baseline going forward about people's priorities around the world and what people need. And actually, education is by far the top priority for most people around the world. And that's regardless of age, gender, poverty level. That's been a kind of encouraging thing for us to see, that people still value education so much.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both for joining us on this Digital Jam session today. And the theme for today and what we're going to talk about is actually the application of future technologies or current technologies into organisations and movements like the United Nations, in terms of how do we provide that kind of scalability of technology that really does facilitate something or make it just, simpler. And one of the things that comes to mind is this idea and this notion that with technology, the best use of technology, the best way that technology is integrated into any experience is when it is seamless, when it just feels like something magical just happened. And I kind of point this one at you, Dennis, because I know that a lot of people, when they first interact with Amy and realise or are told that she is not human, there is that little moment of, no way, how did I miss this? And I'm kind of curious from your perspective how you see your technology specifically being able to assist in organisations of this kind of scale when we're talking about a global scale of organisation.
So I am not a huge fan of the word assist. And I actually think, not to be rude or anything, but I think we might have a change for where we're going to move away from software assisting you in doing a task, as in you do it a little bit faster, a little bit more accurate, a little bit more aligned to whatever process you put in place, into that a software doing jobs. Meaning that it's not that I don't understand how to set up a meeting. I've done it tens of thousands of times over the last 20 years. I did it exactly 2 hours out of me coming out of college. So it's not a difficult process to go execute on. It's that I don't want to do it. And I'm not even sure I'm adding any value. Speaking to Tanya and Kristen on Skype, that's cool. Setting it up, not so much. So I think we're going to have this paradigm shift for where what we know as software today on our desktop, laptops, apps on our phone, it's going to move away from that paradigm into this new paradigm of intelligent agents that understand objectives. I tell you what I want done, then you go do that in the next minute, hour, or days. And that I find super exciting. And I think perhaps the kind of aha moment or surprise when people are going to interact with our agent, and we're still at the very beginning here in our industry, is that people can agree with me on the fact that, yeah, I don't want to click 15 buttons to get to Miami over the weekend. All I wanted was a trip to Miami with my wife, 2 teenage daughters, pay no more than $1,200. That was the objective, not the 3 hours on Expedia to make it happen. So people can play it out in their heads, but when they experience it, the joy, I think, is just so surprising so I didn't have to click a drop down or apply some text to an input box or click a radio button or a checkbox. I could just tell her, set something up between Kristen and I, come early next week, not Tuesday. And she bloody did it. How wonderful is that? So that's something for where I can certainly see a massive paradigm shift from what happened in the past, for where you almost need to be somewhat well educated to fully utilize the software that was put in place into a new setting for where not only does it do more, but it'll kind of democratize access to software for where more people can start to utilize it than before. And it's not that, and I'll give you an example here, that say something as simple as Excel is a difficult application to access, but you still need to be somewhat of an expert. I'm not sure if I asked my mom, who I love and is a wonderful woman, could jump in and do that pivot table I want to have done on a specific set of data in the next 5 minutes, because it's not really that easy. But she can certainly formulate the question to an agent of what she wants done. And then that agent needs to kind of figure out, oh, what she's trying to do here is really to apply a pivot table to the data which was ingested, and how about I just give her the answer then? So that's how I see things play out, that things become easier, it will do jobs in full, and it will become available to a much wider audience.
I'm interested then, from your perspective, Christian, obviously within the UN and the types of roles that people have within the UN, there are different types of interactions, shall we say. So you have the internal facing in terms of that, meetings that need to happen internally. You have people on the ground who are working proactively to, facilitate or to assist people on the ground. And then you have those just general members of the public trying to engage with or do something with the United Nations. So when you hear about a type of technology like what Dennis is talking about and the future for that technology, what kind of ways do you see something like that being able to benefit those three different types of audiences that you have?
Well, I definitely had a little moment when I first was introduced to Amy. It only took me one email, I'd like to proudly say. But I definitely looked at that response and was completely excited that I would never, ever have to write that type of email again in the future. Because a lot of times people write really, stark responses that aren't always friendly. And Amy's always friendly, which is what's really nice about her. So having that kind of internal interaction to set something up would be really incredible, to be honest.
And here's the funny thing. So, first of all, so we never set out to kind of fool people for where this is some sort of daily Turing test which we run at the office for where how many people can you convince that the machine is human. We have this belief that we should tell people up front that this is a machine, but we should do it so well that you want to treat it like a human. And there's a ton of reasons for why we think that makes sense. So, applause to you for having it figured out almost immediately, but also that it doesn't sound like you saw it as a turnoff, but really just as in, I just want to meet with these people. If I can have this entity in between that can help us out, all good with me. And I think that's what's going to happen here. And I think that's the exciting part. And I think just to add, without getting overly excited here, but what I think is going to be exciting when some of these agents start to take over some of these jobs where humans don't really add much value. You don't need imagination and creativity to figure out that we're supposed to meet up on a Wednesday. But I think the interesting part is when agents start to kind of do these tasks for many people, things turn superhuman. And to the extent for where it becomes almost kind of magical. For where if I'm to meet up with Kristen, right, and I CC in Amy, but Kristen's response is one for where, hey, Dennis, wonderful. I have CC'd in Andrew on my end. He can hash it out with Amy. But what if Andrew is Amy? Who is she talking to? So she's talking to another assistant, which happens to be herself. And then all of a sudden, instead of this kind of day and a half asynchronous back and forth for where we're trying to figure out a day, it becomes immediate. And that's, I think, it's a new way of thinking.
That is actually quite interesting in that so far I've not had to use Amy with anybody else who's already got Amy, apart from yourself. And it was quite quick, I do have to say. But I just wanted to kind of drill back down onto how artificial agents can be useful in more broad scoping global organizations like the United Nations. And I say this on the basis of how can they make an impact on the ground? Because you have so many different types of tasks that are being carried out, whether that's doctors, without borders who are going in there, they're facilitating treatment, whether that's, people going in and rebuilding homes, or whatever the particular need is. You have these people who are ultimately out there in the world doing something, and they want to be able to focus on just doing the thing that they need to do. That logistical interaction in terms of organizing, for example, the travel arrangements for, an earthquake relief team, for example, who's going to go and help, rescue people who've been buried in the rubble in wherever an earthquake is hit. That kind of logistical assistance from an artificial agent could potentially be a game changer, I would imagine, Kristen.
I completely agree. Not just, the kind of automated tasks of figuring out, meetings and travel, but I can certainly see a need for having some artificial being that is concerned with your well-being. I mean, one of my favorite movies recently is Big Hero 6. And it's the greatest film about something that cares about you so much that it wants to make sure you're okay all the time. And if there is something out there in rural communities, per se, that is linked to your mobile phone, and you're a woman that gets pregnant and you're supposed to come back for checkups and on a regular basis, and there's something that is concerned and telling you in a kind voice that you need to go back, and helping you with the travel logistics and making sure that your boss is told and making sure that you're on the bus and things like that, that's really some exciting things for the future on mitigating some kind of, approachable issues about trying to convince people to stick to regimens and things like that.
And I am curious, Dennis, because I know you're very focused on artificial intelligence and artificial agents, but when it comes to future technology, whether that's software or hardware, what is it that you see as being kind of the types of technology that most excite you in terms of being able to have that kind of global impact?
So it used to be that technology was for the very few because of some sort of cost settings that wouldn't allow people to get access to it. We now reached the point for where almost anybody will be able to get access to, say, a smartphone. But everybody having a smartphone doesn't necessarily allow them to do the things that we want them to do in the current software setting. So what I see with this next paradigm is that in the agent setting, you move away from the traditional UIs we've grown up with, right? We go to work today, 8 o'clock, we open up our desktop, we got our big ass screen, and we can do the things that we've been taught in school. But what do you do when you're in an area with low bandwidth, a cheap Android phone, and not much screen real estate? And that's where I think, again, we will see software become completely democratized. Because if I can text, then you can interact with an agent. That means there will be a ton of more people who will be allowed access to data, information, software, and solutions, because you can just ask the agent. So for me, I think we're moving towards a setting for where everybody is slightly better off, whether that is on just asking questions, getting answers, doing their own analysis, come up with new creative solutions, because you can just really text the agent. I'm using us as an example here, but I think there'll be a ton of agents that look like us for different verticals, but you can just ask Amy. So what did you and Tanya talk about with these two guests? I want to see what you talk about. Or can you move this meeting? Or can you get back to me upon my return? Or any number of other things, but it really just takes words. It doesn't take ability to go into some app where you should be able to access that and it's only compatible with the newest version of Android and all of those things that kind of prohibit people from getting access to software. This is going to make it, I think, completely democratized. And that's, I think, probably what excites me the most.
Okay, so here's my thing. I'm gonna throw this at you. I'm gonna say Wikipedia. And when I say this, what I mean is that we've become a generation that relies on centralized data such as Wikipedia And we take for granted that the content in that Wikipedia is somehow the truth. But most people forget that when they actually look at Wikipedia, it is actually a collection of a community of people who've gone on and they've entered that information and that data. There's nobody checking that the data has actually come from a genuine source. There is no cross-referencing or genuine requirement for that data to be true. So actually, when we look at Wikipedia, we're looking at fiction. We forget this. We take it as fact. We take it as the dictionary. And so my question to you is this. In the scope of artificial agent, do you feel that there is a danger that we're going to get to a future where actually people just do not remember how to do these basic functional tasks that artificial agents will be taking over for them? In the same way that right now, in this modern day and age, if you say to a teenager, you know what, I need the answer to X, Y, or Z question, they're just going to crack out their mobile phone and go straight to Google. You know, the phrase Google it actually means something in our modern language. And that really demonstrates a lack of willingness or understanding to actually go and do the research for themselves. Many people wouldn't know how to go and navigate a proper physical library these days because they just go and Google it or they wiki it. And I'm curious from your perspective then, and Kristen, feel free to throw in some comment here on this, but I'm curious then, if that is the case, is there not a danger that with artificial agents that people will become mentally and culturally lazy?
So I am ever the optimist, and I'm obviously heavily biased. So you can call bullshit at any moment now when I give you my kind of version of why I'm optimistic about how it's going to play out in the future. So I think the fact of the matter is that you are being fooled on a daily basis, as is right now, and probably have been for the last decade. So most of the internet as we know it, in retail and any other vertical that you can imagine, will have recommender type systems. Go to Netflix, Amazon, or anywhere else, they'll recommend products. They'll have products on the homepage. They'll have products on checkout. So massive kind of recommender systems. And somehow we've come to believe that because something is being recommended, it is in our interest. And I hope that people, certainly the three of us here on this call, aren't
I'm
so
clearly
naive.
too cynical. I'm way too cynical to believe that.
Yeah, aren't so naive to believe that when Netflix recommends us a movie, that it's because they think we like it. No, that's not the case. So all of these systems are really just systems that are put in place to manipulate us. Not because they're evil people, because they run a business. So it's not random that of the 10 suggestions I have on Netflix, 4 of them are items that they produced. But they haven't produced 40% of all the content in the world. So somehow I can certainly see through why they would want that, because those are the ones where they don't pay any commission to the studio. So if I can continue my Netflix subscription, watching their content, they're making a better margin. That's not a recommender system. That is a system that manipulates me to stay happy with Netflix at minimal cost. It's the same on Amazon. Oh, people who like this also like this. No, people who like this, we find it likely that you will assimilate with to the extent where you might also buy this product. So you buy 2 at the same time. And it's not a recommender system in that regard. What I actually do think, so that's just saying that we're already there. So whatever pessimism you would apply to a future setting, I think we're there already. What I think agents will be able to do is to create a level of positive skepticism for where you could ask the agent to pick 2 data sources, to compare the 2 data sources, to show you the delta, and otherwise do things for where you would probably have been too lazy to go do that yourself, but now they have an employee at $9 a month that can go do this for me. I will do it. So I don't think even my high school daughters don't know that Wikipedia is crowdsourced. I think they figured that out pretty quickly and are skeptical. But they're busy girls, so they'll just pick up one source. But if they had this agent that could say, hey, could you also pick up a secondary source, say from the World Bank on this particular subject matter? I think they would. But hey, there's only 2 hours to do homework, and I'm an hour into it, and I'm just going to pick Wikipedia. So I'm very optimistic, both because I think what you described is happening already, and I think the agents are actually here to save us. So
Okay.
there's my bias.
Okay, somewhat biased. Kristen, from your perspective, as a user of these things and as somebody who's experienced Amy, what's your take on this? Because not to impugn Dennis, but I'm just sitting here thinking, but what's stopping somebody like Google from just inserting whatever they want commercially into whatever version of an agent they produce? Likewise with Apple and, whoever else decides they're going to create an artificial agent. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, Kristen.
Well, before 2 weeks ago, I didn't even know how advanced we were with AI technology. So I would like to think that it's already upon us, just as Dennis was saying, very present in the normal life. And I think that what you're saying, Dennis, is actually, we have to think that way because it is here and it is upon us. And we have to have this optimistic approach that these people are this new technology is going to come in. And I say people, that's funny. And solve problems for us instead of create problems for us. And I think with things like Wikipedia, you could take the pessimistic view that, kids don't know how to use the Dewey Decimal System. But they are also able to read a lot more and find information a lot faster. Yeah, they don't store it in their brain the same way, but the amount of information that younger people are able to access and link together in new ways is incredible, and so much more than we ever were able to growing up ourselves. So I also like to take the optimistic approach to this.
But I'm curious because, for example, we are at this stage where just calling it artificial agents rather than artificial intelligence, because there's some people who will not be named like to say it's just an algorithm. This idea that if we're starting out with this notion that somebody like Dennis is in the world creating artificial agents, and they are beginning to leverage certain experiences for us and do things for us. But then there are people like, for example, Kristen, who may never have come across this. Where is the ethical and moral responsibility of an organization like X.AI to make sure that what you're doing is morally sound? And I say this because we're in this moment in history where technology is evolving faster than the actual creative ideas that utilize them. And VR is a great example of this. So virtual reality, this beautiful new technology and essentially a new medium is actually developing faster than people can come up with the idea of how to utilize it. So, you have a lot of these people who've got this great technology and they're kind of going, yeah, but what do I do with it? And how do I create something meaningful with it? And nobody's there at the front of that leading edge of emerging technology to guide people and to say, actually, you know what, this is great that you're doing this. It's great that early adopters may want to do this, but is it necessarily right for the rest of the world? The rest of the mainstream consumers who are going to have to come in maybe 5 or 10 years' time and utilize whatever it is that you've built, whatever process or methodology you have established, and they're going to be the ones to have to live with it. And I am curious whether or not we feel that there is a need for more moral guidance and more ethical guidance in the way that technologists and technology companies are developing these new and emerging technologies.
I've just actually been in a 3-day workshop about virtual reality, and we discussed this question a lot. The ethical questions come up all the time, and in new technologies like this, we are just figuring it out as we go along, and I think that what I'm seeing is that the good stuff will rise above because at the end of the day, it's like viral videos. The good things will rise or the bad things, but what people like to watch and they're comfortable watching, they will continue to watch. And if they're not comfortable with it because of how it makes them feel or something like that, then they won't watch it. And actually, someone from the New York Times, Graham Robertson, had a great quote. And he said, treat it like a head. It's on your head, treat it like a head. So take the kind of approach with how you would treat a head and what goes inside it and things like that. You would never yell at someone in their face and things like that. Maybe you will, but that's your own type of experience you're trying to create. But when you're creating virtual reality or putting it on people's, the technology on people's heads, think of that while you're actually doing that.
Dennis, what's your take on this?
Two comments. One, I think we're probably moving to a slightly fairer setting for where a lot of the existing technology is centralized, whether that be a Facebook or LinkedIn or other tools and technologies that we are using and are being exposed to, driven by single organizations. And I think when agents arrive, it will be decentralized because the agent might be run by an organization, but are employed, and I'm putting kind of this in air quotes, by the individuals themselves. And they instruct them on what to do under what set of preferences. So I think that will move towards a slightly better setting. So that's the one part where I actually think we're moving towards something more reasonable. On the other side, kind of think about somewhat ethical settings here, if we want to say that. Mm-hmm. I think that agents might actually just like money be an amplification of who you are. And it tends to be that if you're an asshole and you get $10 million, you're just more of an asshole, but you haven't really changed. And I think if you're an asshole and you have 9 intelligent agents employed, you'll be who you are, but it might be amplified through the ability of having access to these agents that do jobs on your behalf. So I don't think we're moving towards a, again, poorer setting. I think it'll be decentralized. I think it'll be upon you to make it worse or make it better. And who you are will be exactly what comes out of it, perhaps slightly amplified.
I can see that. So I'm curious then, in terms of what you think the most significant change needs to be, in terms of allowing things like artificial agents or allowing technology and software to influence and impact the future of organizations like the United Nations or other similar global organizations or even governments. What do you think needs to be that significant shift? Whether that is a cultural shift or a technological shift, what do you think needs to happen in order for this to be something that can change the way that organizations or governments do business? And I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that, Kristen.
Well, I actually think that this is a great solution for one of the issues that the United Nations is facing right now, which is lack of funding. And with, the rise in humanitarian crises, as well as, government responsibilities at home, there is a lot less funding available for the UN. And being able to kind of, I don't want to say replace people with technology like this, but replace menial tasks and allowing people to rise up and do other things that are, a lot more important than scheduling a meeting, and that can take so much time when you have a lot of people involved, is an amazing solution to being able to free up, brilliant people to do their jobs better.
Okay. And Dennis, what's your thoughts on this?
If I take 8 steps back, I'm certainly a huge fan of education, tech education, in whatever definition we would apply to that, and doing it as early as possible. And I think it might even already be happening. So I'm 43, sadly, because I'm getting older, but I'm probably still of the opinion that I will semi-force my kids to go to college, right? Because who am I? I would be somewhat of a poor parent if I didn't. But I think we're at this moment in time for where really the output of college, outside of the credentials of having gone to a good school, that knowledge you can acquire in 15 different ways, and probably better and more focused. And that really excites me. Really excites me. And it used to be still, to this day, somewhat of an unfair, rigged game, this whole idea of college, where I think the future is going to be, again, so much fairer. And I know I'm so optimistic about everything that it seems like, Dennis, you need to kind of tone your optimism down a little bit. But I actually do think that's a very interesting change that I want to see happening. And I think it's underway right now. I'll still force those girls to go to college, but I think the next generation, that might not be as easy a choice. You can just really do most of it online if you wanted to, with two of your friends, and be even smarter than I were when I, graduated from college.
I tend to agree in as much as I think we're seeing this shift into being able to be an entrepreneur and being able to be part of this kind of digital nomad approach to life that really doesn't require you to necessarily have gone to, college or university in order to be able to take part and participate. So I think it's a very interesting future that we're moving into. But guys, for today's session, I want to wrap up and I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. But before we go, I'm going to give you both the option to do a little bit of, pitching and tell us about something that you would like our listeners to go have a look at. And I'm going to start with you, Kristen, because I'm very aware that there is a very important and very interesting campaign that was just launched yesterday.
Thanks, Tanya. Actually, yes, yesterday was International Women's Day, the 8th of March. And we actually collaborated with YouTube in a very big way to pull together 7 international creators from, different regions of the world who are young women and who use their platform to try and empower other young women to, find their voice and find courage and bravery to be who they are. And we brought them together at a workshop a few weeks ago to speak with them about what is gender equality, what is female empowerment, and taught them some of the different facts about women around the world and the inequalities and discrimination that they face. And so it's an effort to build capacity with these young people, empower them to take some international issues and be able to translate it and reach new audiences. But it's also a way for us to learn about speaking to younger people in different ways and trying to, take our very technical messaging and make it accessible for more people. So if you go to YouTube, it's the video is called #OwnYourVoice. And there's a playlist which starts off with, the group of them talking about empowering other people and asking people to tell them what their voice is and how they're going to use their voice for good. And then there's individual videos by each of the young women talking about how they're going to do that themselves and on their platform. So this is the first in what will be a year-long initiative, and we're really, really excited and to see how it's going to evolve, how the young people are going to evolve, how people are going to respond to it. There's a lot of people who give their opinions on social media, so we can have immediate feedback about what we might be doing wrong, what we might be doing right. And we're really excited about it. It's a big time for us.
Wonderful, thank you. And Dennis, we've talked so much about Amy, but many of our listeners will be wondering, how on earth do I get hold of Amy? How do I access Amy? Would you like to share with them how they can go about doing that?
Absolutely. So first, I wish I could come up with something as noble as Kristen. So I actually did watch the campaign yesterday, or at least the first kind of 2 videos that I stumbled into that Google somehow recommended to me. So hats off to that. Mine will be kind of 10 levels below that, and I'll be the capitalist of the call. I will be very happy if people would jump to the website x.ai, sign up, and take a look at the future, or at least what we think could be the future. So that'll be wonderful on that end. And then I want to leave everybody with just one interesting tidbit that they should kind of go check out later today if they have just a few minutes. So a week or 2 ago, Boston Dynamics, the Google X company that build robots, published a video. And you might have seen it, and if you have not, you're going to go watch it. And it's a robot who is moving really a box from here to there. Nothing really astonishing. But the interesting thing here is that they put a human in front of him with a hockey stick, and he is just
beating the crap out of the poor thing. That's what he's doing.
And that is what I want you to see, because what you just said, that's what I felt as well. The poor thing. I actually had a little bit of empathy, thinking, what an asshole, that guy with a hockey stick. I don't like him. We need to kind of replace him. And I felt a little bit sorry for the machine, for where, come on, leave it alone. But it's really just a machine, right? And nobody feels sorry for your enter button on your keyboard when you hit it a little bit harder. It's just a keyboard, right? But somehow that video and that setting created some emotion in me, and I was actually a little bit surprised. And I think everybody should try to do that because that will make you think. But that's just the exercise for today. Invest those 4 minutes. Don't forget to go sign up for X.AI. That will make me happy.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so in order to allow our listeners to be able to follow you, find out a little bit more about what you do, or to do exactly what you've asked them to do, we'd like you to share with us your social media handle of choice. Dennis, what would that be for you?
I am on Twitter under the handle @DennisMortensen, and you should be able to Google it if you can't spell my funny Scandinavian last name.
We will make sure it is in the episode notes. And Kristen, what would be the best way for people to be able to follow you or what you do?
I would actually recommend my organization, mostly because I also do a lot of the social media for them. So it's SDG Action, and that's on Facebook and on Twitter that way.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. And if you enjoyed this session and you like this content, don't forget to subscribe and review. I have been Tanya, your friendly host for this session and the founder of Digital Jam. And don't forget to follow us on Digital Jam Ltd. DigitalJamSessions.com